We're here really excited to begin the partnership with ABC No Rio, who turns 45 this year. And as part of our partnership, which has been a long-standing relationship with Clemente, as we've housed the zine collection in their offices for over a decade in our third floor, which we'll encourage you to visit if you haven't yet done so. And we're welcomed here by Carlos Quipe, Libertad Guerra. Carlos is the curator of Historietas, Latinx Comix as Alternative Histories. And so today you're here, a couple of the artists that are on display in this gallery, open gallery at the Clemente, talk about their work, their practice, and be able to engage with them afterwards in some conversations. Historietas is part of our programming for Historias, a 3-year initiative that Libertad and I have been co-leading, and I've been pleasure to work with her throughout the development of this initiative, and I'll let her speak more on it.
So hi everyone. I see a lot of great faces that I haven't seen for a while. I think COVID got in the way. I've been the director here for 5 years. I have the honor to be in this stage of the Clemente history, which is such a valuable place for the downtown community and what it has meant. Right now we're under renovation, as you probably guessed, but the Clemente is the city that, not the city, but the building that never sleeps. For good or for bad, that's the reputation it's had for 3 decades now. We make things happen no matter what, and now our galleries for the moment are this hallway, but amazing, like we've already had like 3 exhibits in this hallway, but surely in about a year from now, with our renovation, we're gonna double the size of our galleries. So we're here to keep on partnering as it's our style, collaborating, and such one of the collaborations is through this umbrella initiative that we've come about. We're in the first phase of it. It's called Historias, the larger umbrella initiative. It's about charting the impact of Latino communities intersectionally, and other intersectional communities, I would say immigrant very explicitly, as is the want of everybody to just shut that down. And how we've charted and how New York City it's own to them. That's not a controversial thing, but we're charting it because a lot of it's about rescuing narratives, and in that we're also doing it in a way that hacks the system in terms of the underfunding that exists for communities of color and for organizations, cultural organizations of color, by doing partnerships, so supplementing with each other through partnerships with whether it's collectives, nonprofits, you name it. So that's what's behind it. I hope that you find a little bit more about what Historias is finally in late 2026, 2027 will the cumulative effort of all these partnerships and all these sittings that we're doing together. We're going to open with a big exhibit in all the Clemente galleries, and obviously the building is also going to be accessible to all different physical capacities. So it's an exciting time. At the same time, it's growing times, and one of those such great collaborations is with Historietas, which riffs off on the name and the work that Carlos Quipe has been doing with the amazing collective of Latino cartoonists. So thank you so much. We're so glad to be hosting this. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy that you're all here for the opening of Historietas, and being able to be all together is so important right now. And this is also like a great moment for the cartoonists that are in the show to be together for the first time, hopefully not the last time. Maybe we can keep this kind of energy going. I just want to let you know that there's also going to be another event happening next weekend at Emily Harvey Foundation. So everybody please grab one of these flyers on your way out so you can know about next week's event, which is honoring a World War III Illustrated, which is one of the inspirations for this exhibit, as well as ABC No Rio. which is in a way an unofficial base to World War III Illustrated, which is a comic book magazine which started in 1979 during the Reagan era, and it's still going on today. We have a new issue that just came out, and hopefully we can all check out everybody's comics here after the reading. You can all come and see if you want to purchase a comic book. So yeah, please don't forget that there's going to be comics for sale after the reading. Okay. Let's see. I wanted to say that Seth Bachman is here. Seth is one of the founders of World War III Illustrated, which is a place for political comic books. I was just writing about how there's really not that many venues for political comics right now. So World War III is, because of its longevity, it's one of the most important political comics in the U.S. Yes, the cartoonists that you'll be meeting today also have a socio-political edge to their work, and this is also why they all kind of fit within the spirit of World War III Illustrated and ABC No Rio. Okay, so I just want to thank the team at Clemente. Thank you so much for your hard work and dedication for making Historietas happen, and to the team at ABC No Rio 45. Don't forget to check out the exhibit that's happening at Emily Harvey Foundation. There'll be more information. If you picked up a program, there's a QR code that will take you to all the other events that are happening at the same time as this event. Okay, and so as your program will show you, I'm gonna start the show. Yeah, we're just gonna begin right now. Is everybody ready?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the image for the Historietas flyer. It contains a piece of artwork from all the artists here today, and also on the left you can see the character called Condorito. Condorito is a Chilean character that it represents like the post-fascist Chile identity, which is it's a very irreverent comic. It's full of humor, Condorito in my version has become a anti-fascist protester. Right? Fuera fachos means fascists out of here. Okay? Let's see. So the first comic I wanted to talk to you about is called Food Not Wars, and it was featured in the food issue of World War III Illustrated, which is one of the comics that we have for sale. Come in. Food Not Wars is a comic that's inspired by my volunteer friend who was part of Food Not Bombs, which was also based out of ABC No Rio. The first image that you see on the top there is a cornucopia. The cornucopia is a symbol that's used in the Peruvian national shield, and it just representative of the bounty and wealth of our natural resources, right? And so all the food that's coming out of the cornucopia is the food that Food Not Bombs collects from different supermarkets or grocery stores, or sometimes scavenge food, right? And in the bottom here, you can see how they are having a mock dinner in front of the Waldorf Astoria, where HRC is having like a really expensive, dinner for their donors. So outside, the Food Not Bombs people are holding a free dinner, like an alternative dinner, so that you don't have to go inside and give money to HRC. Which at the time, even though they are like an LGBT organization, at the time they were not supporting the T in LGBT. And so the comic continues with images from outside of ABC Rio. They had a fabulous mural outside and also a fabulous mural inside in their kitchen. And then this comic goes about telling you how the volunteers put together their meal to serve to people at Tompkins Square Park. But there is, in the comic, I'm showing the challenges that come with working with a group like this and volunteering and having to sacrifice a lot of time and effort to this cause. And as the volunteer character gets more involved with Food Not Bombs, they also realize that sometimes schedules, because of schedule changes and just basically like capitalism, sometimes sometimes it doesn't work out to volunteer with groups. So at the end of the comic, this character who was cooking for Food Not Bombs ends up all by themselves in front of another HRC person who is asking for money, and then all the stores around the neighborhood are all like having stuff for sale and stuff. It's just more of the capitalist horror when he's suddenly alone. Okay, and so a lot of the comics that I do for World War III Illustrated are based on people that I know, but also they're autobiographical. And this story has to do with my brother-in-law, who back in 2007 ended up, even though he's also a legal resident, ended up deported back to El Salvador. Okay, and so El Salvador is also known as the Pulgarcito of the Americas. Pulgarcito means the Tom Thumb of the Americas, and it just refers to the size of the country compared to the rest of the continent. And so in the beginning here, we see the character Lucas. He's working for FedEx because he can speak English. And so they outsource those jobs to El Salvador, and he can actually do that job because he was a resident in the US. But so this is him and how he's surviving after he's been deported. And so at the end of this page here, he kind of has a flashback to what happened to him. So we go back in time to 2004, almost 20 years ago, when he's having issues, domestic issues, and gets stopped by the police while he's having, he's going through drug withdrawal. He had like many issues. And during when he's about to get out of jail, they tell him that he's gonna be held by ICE. And one of the purposes of this comic for me was to explain where ICE had come from, and I wanted to explain how before the 9/11 era, immigration, INS, and customs were two separate agencies that after 9/11 became merged into one agency that just further criminalized immigrants. And so he, his partner Isabel, who's based on my sister, she's trying to track down where he's being held, and having to speak to a lot of different people, figuring out, even what is ICE. And so that's, where I go into explaining where the agency came from. There's a scene here now when she goes to visit him, where he's being held, and she brings his little son, who I have named Michael with a Y, M-Y-C-O-L, which is a phonetic way of spelling Michael. Back where I come from in Peru, sometimes people will name their kids an American name, so it'll be easier for them to integrate when it's time for them to move away to America, right? So it's already, you know, pre-planned in a way. And I've always loved the way that there's a alternative comic in Peru called the Submundo de Michael, and it's spelled with M-Y-C-O-L. It means the underworld of Michael. And it's a comic that is very irreverent and anti-Catholic, and was, I think, a big inspiration for me to do independent comics. So that's why I named my sister's son in the comic Michael, to remind me of that comics influence. So at the end, we go back to the present time when basically he, you know, is thinking about coming back to the U.S. Through illegal means, and she urges him to not do that because then it might actually be more difficult for them to reunite. And so at the end, he just goes back to his customer service job, you know, which he was able to get because he speaks fluent English because he was a resident. Okay, and so I was able to continue the story of Isabel many years later after I had published that previous comic, like back in 2007. This was a comic from 2022 where Isabel now is, you know, the head of her household, and Michael is now a full-grown man. Because you can see on the left there, she has a little daughter, and her mom Anita and her brother Will. These are all characters that I had also brought into World War III Illustrated, telling their different stories. Anita, for example, is a character that I showed how she got her master's degree after she was 50 years old. In an issue of World War III that was more about like the kind of world that we want, kind of like a positive, optimistic view of things. And the Will character is nicknamed Political Will because he's a fictitious character that I used to show my friends political activities and different protests, and he's a character that I like using to also show that political people, even though they're very opinionated, they can still find connection with other people and make friends. That's why at the end of every Political Will comic, he ends up meeting a friend, even though by the next comic he'll be alone again, right? Okay, so in the Isabel comic, she, you know, has her entire family in the car. She's driving the car, and that's when she hears on the radio about the first COVID-19 case in New York State. And Isabel, in the bottom of the page here, you can see she works doing admissions for a hospital. But it's not a hospital. She is doing admissions for a nursing home. But it's not just for the elderly, it's also for people who are like recovering from injuries. It's that kind of nursing as well, right? And so this is, I'm telling you this so you can keep in mind what happened when Cuomo was governor. He sent COVID patients to nursing homes like the one that Isabel works at. So this is kind of setting up those elements of the story. So it's not just about how she survived the COVID era, but it's also what happened to her at the nursing home when Cuomo was governor. In the last panel here, some intolerant person is yelling at her because she has a Latino accent. And so when I first started doing this comic, I was thinking about, how to make a narrative out of, this kind of like domestic and also workplace situation. And I started thinking about shows like Nurses. I don't know if everybody's seen that sitcom, Nurses. But also I was thinking about Roseanne, like a working class character who was like the head of her household. And so I started thinking about how my sister kind of grew up in the era of the 90s when we would watch Roseanne and laugh along, before she got all right-wing, right? So I was thinking, what if we could make that kind of situation story, but put my sister in it as the protagonist, right? So when she's in the nursing home, she hears all of the other staff there complaining about PPE and having to obey all these new rules. And one of the rules is about Governor Cuomo sending COVID patients to the nursing home and having to fax the Department of Health with the numbers of people who had died from COVID, right? Sometimes, like if they, were taken away to another facility so they could die, then they could report less numbers, right? So the story continues with Isabel at her home, with Michael there. He's even talking to his dad, who is in El Salvador. He's talking about how they're gonna have to have a drive-through graduation because of COVID. One of the teachers of her young kid also has COVID, and so she's thinking to herself, how could a teacher not know, how to protect herself? She's also, very critical of, other professionals, who are essential workers. So this is the moment where she gets vaccinated and is being told, how to, understand how she's going to be feeling after taking her shot. In the corner here, I've got a moment where Will comes back because he also is afraid of taking his vaccine. And so she literally has to tell him to be brave, that it's going to help you stay alive. This was also a comic that was coming out, during the post-COVID period, and I really wanted to use this comic to also spread the word about protecting yourself. Because sometimes people just they don't want to wear masks and stuff. Okay, so I'm not sure if you can see from there, but the coat that Isabel is wearing when she gets home, it actually has a pattern, which is actually like the COVID germ, that has like a bunch of little things sticking out of the circle. So by the time you see she's getting the call from, because she has to get tested every week, and then she was called by her own job to be told that she has COVID, right? So by the time you learn that, she's actually already wearing COVID on her clothes, right? And so she, is under a lot of stress. There's all this noise, all the words, for noises that are happening off screen, just kind of crushing her. And what she does is slowly puts on her own mask because she's just been told that she has COVID in her home. And also, you might not be able to notice from there, but her eyeballs, I actually turned them into little tiny hearts. So that to me means, she is covering her mouth and nose to protect her kids out of love, right? And so she explains how they all have to also wear masks, and they have to now deal with like the school departments and testing the kids and making sure that they are well enough to go to school and manage all her responsibilities. I really wanted to make sure that the dog is always like wagging his tail and always being like a source of joy and happiness in her home. And so what happened to Isabel is that she had like a certain pain that she thought was a COVID symptom. And so in this moment is where the character of Isabel, who's a caregiver, goes to then becoming a patient. And so she has to go to the hospital, she has to call the hospital from the car, telling them that she has COVID before getting to the hospital. And then the first thing that she has to do is deal with a person in admissions. Basically, she has to deal with somebody who's doing her job at the nursing home. And while she is waiting for somebody to see her, she has a moment where she thinks that she is about to die. And so she takes out her phone and starts recording a message to her kids saying how, you know, she wishes that she could be with them in this scary moment. And the reason why she has to wait so long to be seen is because there is some other person in the hospital barfing and yelling, and her rich mother is there getting all the attention, right? And she's thinking to herself, well, do I have to also throw a fit to be seen? So turns out that she had, that the pain was coming from a panic attack. It wasn't actually a COVID symptom. And in the, even during her doctor visits, she had to tell the doctor to put on her mask. This is, you know, because she is in the health field, she was probably a really difficult patient. But she knew what she was talking about. And in the bottom of the page here, they're doing like another COVID testing, but it has to be like almost like a drive-through test. And we do end in a happy moment where she has been promoted and she gets a raise for doing her job, you know, every day as an essential worker during the COVID break. And she is telling her, telling the reader how basically COVID now is normal and masks are normal, and she is just used to it now, even though it feels weird to say that. The very last panel, she is helping a patient in the nursing home put on his mask. And at the end, we see a picture frame with the whole family, Isabel's whole family. And her kid has a t-shirt that says Peru on it, just to make double sure that the reader knows that these are not white characters, that these are Latino characters. A lot of times, unless you are using full color, people will just assume that the characters are white characters. So sometimes I have to really hammer in the fact that they are Latino characters, either by naming the comic after them, after their Latino name, or in this instance, you know, I had to like use a variety of gray tones to indicate that. Okay, and so that's my presentation. Sandy is up. Hold on, let me list this up for you. Okay.
Will you please take my seats? There's so many of you here. Thank you for coming. So, Thank you all for coming. It's so great to see so many wonderful faces, so many familiar faces. There is a very heartening mix of mentors, colleagues, and friends here. Give yourselves a round of applause. There has been so much death of place here in New York City driven by commerce and real estate, and this is one of the places that is drawing a line in the sand and partnering with other law institutions that have meant a lot to me, like ABC No Rio. ABC No Rio, you know, it was one of the only places in the 1990s that was a community center that had a computer lab. I don't know how they pulled that off. And I'm very encouraged by the fact that we're in a place doing this with my fellow artists, with people I have so much respect for and have been influenced by, and there's construction going on. That's a great sign, that's a great thing. So thank you to the Clemente Center, and thank you to Carla Pispe for setting this all in motion. So Historietas is often what you hear comic books when they're not referred to as comics by us Latinos. And I'm Sandy Jimenez, if you don't know. I have been doing comics. I guess World War III Illustrated published the very first thing I did in 1991. Seth Tabachman, who has been called out already but will be called out repeatedly today, is one of the co-founders of World War III Illustrated in 1979, which is a political anthology, and was the first to publish my work. I had kicked around a lot in the late 80s and could not get published anywhere. Took my work to Heavy Metal, took my work to 1994, took my work to Epic. Those magazines are all gone except for Heavy Metal. World War III Illustrated is still going strong and has published tons and tons of my work. So if I have to talk about what the sort of overarching quality of my work is, which is a question that comes up all the time because I am now inexplicably 57 years old. I think World War III published me when I was only 22 or 23. So I'm like, went from being one of the young kids there to being one of the old men very quickly. Too fast for my liking. But I've been asked repeatedly if there's something that ties my work together, which, you know, spans the world of film, animation, commercial design, storyboards. I've been an educator on and off, mostly on recently. I think it's this notion of the monster and what a monster is. And it's always been a theme, either subtext in my overt stories about the South Bronx or explicitly in my action-adventure stuff like Marley Davidson. But to me, the notion of a monster is an inherently political thing. Who gets called a monster? A monster is something that is out of natural order, something that should be destroyed. A monster in the classic root of the Latin term, monstrum, is something that shows. And to me, that's a very valuable thing because I think what you call a monster says more about you than your target. And everyone in this room has been something monstrous at some point. Children, when they are, you know, not behaving right, are monsters. Immigrants are monsters when they are unwanted and not serving the roles that the power structure wants them to, and not being quiet, silent fodder for the machine of capitalism. Gays and lesbians have been monsters. People of all races, African Americans, have been monstrous. And it says more about the person ascribing that label than it does about its target. And I think that's questioning when you're the monster in the role in society, truly, when you're being accused of that, when that's being ascribed to you, or when you are in fact behaving that way, is a question that's very much a fascination underneath all my work that I've only sort of recently begun to realize as I've spoken to people who've looked at my work over this time, and they've sort of seen the threads connecting with that theme in a way that I didn't necessarily make. I always thought that my fascination with monsters was something much more superficial, but it very much does have to do with this idea of what you call something determines what you can do with it, and that's very much at the heart of, you know, our culture in America right now. I mean, I would call this administration that we're currently living under monstrous, and that says something about me, and it says something about that. This is some of the work I did for the graphic canon out of 7 Stories Press. Russ Kick, a beloved editor who passed away a couple of years ago, put together some really interesting adaptations This was 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. I was shocked. Nobody wanted to do a Jules Verne story, so I got to have my pick. And I did a glam rock AIDS era adaptation where I switched all the characters into these musicians that had been a huge influence to me, and yet certainly in childhood I was told to avoid these characters, these personas, these amazing musicians in culture because they were gays and lesbians. So in this splash page we have Mark Almond of Soft Cell as the main character over on the left. We have a steampunk version of the Village People at the bottom. That's Pete Shelley in the middle of the frame there, of the Buzzcocks. We have David Bowie as Nemo. We have Freddie Mercury as, God, I'm forgetting the character's name. Ned, I think it's Ned Land. But I basically, peppered in all those stories and did this without frames. And this was yet again, me exploring this idea of a story in which monsters figure prominently and flipping those accusations and those recriminations on their head and talking about the mechanisms of what make them happen. So my Marley Davidson stories definitely deal with that. They take place in the South Bronx, where I'm from. Most of my stories that I've done for World War III Illustrated center on the South Bronx and are informed by my childhood there during the arson fires in the 1970s. My thesis and capstone right now at the Graduate Center is about a larger memoir that I've been researching for many years. I boldly announced it in 1995 in one of the first anthologies for World War III Illustrated, and Seth looked at me and said, "You're not ready to do that." And I said, "Watch me," and he was right. It took me about close to 30 years to sort of get it together to write about this way in an intelligent way. The things I do in World War III Illustrated, anyone who knows me well enough will be able to spot the analogs of figures and characters in my family and in my life. But they are fictive retellings because I change the order of things and I try to make them serve whatever single topic comes up in a World War III Illustrated issue. So what I'm attempting now is trying to take that and make it serve something that is a little more, if not factual, truthful in a way that serves something other than just my memory, right? So this just shows like the way some of the aesthetics make it into some of my commercial work. Again, I'm obsessed with monsters. Out of my work in the Graduate Center has come this new aesthetic really in the last year and a half. Nancy Miller, who is one of the distinguished professors of English there, I wrote a traditional news term paper for her, and she said, "Why don't you try illustrating this term paper?" So what I did was use this modality that I only use really in commercial illustration. I don't really use it in my work all that much, and try to use it as a way to discuss ideas about the term comorbid, which is a very fascinating idea to me because it literally means, sort of like living with death. So what could that mean in the various ways, other than just like having two diseases at the same time? Is it living with the threat of death? Is it living under an administration that could cause you death? This thing of like living with something that could mean your end. And the aesthetics that came out of this was trying to use something that was closer to the cartoon style of my work in World War III Illustrated, and using the present tense in this penciled, smoky style, so that I don't have to keep saying, way back when, and I can just with those visuals, show people sort of the present tense, what I'm thinking of as I'm narrating to the reader, and then switching to that other modality. This was a test that was done for the Rockefeller Center for a comic book that they wanted to do on immigration. We're hoping that it comes off, but it may or may not, considering how things are going right now. It's interesting. I think it's more relevant than ever, but hopefully they will move forward with it. And this is a sort of compromise between those two modalities. So this is some of the watercolor work I do, and again, my characters are very much informed from where I grew up in. And I think for a lot of us as artists, we take that for granted as something that is just something that we do for self-empowerment. But it's over the last couple of years that I've realized, you know, when I talk to people who've read my stuff, that it was an important mirror for them too. And again, always this idea about what is monstrous, what is, you know, considered natural. That's an inherently political thing. It's not some arbitrary thing. So I'm just going to take you through a few frames of the story that's on exhibit here. You'll be able to read it at length, so I don't want to bore you with reading you through that narrative as much as I love the sound of my own voice. But it appeared in issue 40, What We Want, which was one of our more sort of forward-looking aspirational issues. The story I did for it was called I Was a Lousy Teacher. And it was basically about my first foray into teaching in public school. It was a very traumatic is too strong a word, but unnerving story to see the sort of mechanism that I had come out of. It sort of helped to explain to me, even as I failed at that job, what was done wrong to me during that time. So these are some frames that are actually not in the story, that were cut for length. And they really have to do with, this is a view of C-Squad. This is when I first met the guys at World War III Illustrated. So I'm going to do some name checking and name dropping right now. All the way on the right, that's Seth, who looks exactly the same. There's me, there's Eric Drucker in the foreground. In the middle is James Romberger, who, when I walked into this meeting, he was screaming, "I'm not an anarchist," which was interesting because he was disrupting the meeting. And to the left of James is Sabrina Jones, who's done some incredible nonfiction, graphic memoir work, and graphic biography and graphic history. She did Race to Incarcerate, a book I highly recommend all of you read. Just beyond her, the young woman sketching is Vila Piazza, and all the way on the left is Scott Cunningham. So these are more pages that didn't quite make it into that story, that were really about how finding myself in the system and finding myself as an agent of, you know, the antagonism and repression that children suffer in public schools was a way that I very traumatically confronted the monster in me as someone who became part of this sort of factory setting that was not serving children well, and trying to figure out, you know, how do I get out of that? But that story is up here, and I won't, you know, give away any of the spoilers. Thank you for coming. Thank you so much for listening, and I will now
I didn't get water, I just got sodas.
Don't worry about it. Okay, up next is Ivan Bell Jr. Thank you so much.
So I was, when I had the idea for this thing, he asked me to give him PDFs. I gave him a bunch of images, and he just showed some. So let's see what he put in. My name is Ivan Velez. I'm like a footnote. The first person to do intervention with gay lesbian youth in comics. Back in 1985, which I was closet. When I worked with Milestone, I had the first female-to-male transgender superhero, first featured superhero gay character, all this kind of stuff. Not only that, I added more Latinos and basically diverse characters in any comic Marvel had done or DC had done ever in one book. So that's kind of like my thing. I just keep doing stuff like that. And I kind of fall into that. This is a comic I did in the 90s after I was doing Tales of the Closet. Because if anybody knows AIDS in the 90s back then, it was kind of rough. Because AIDS was really turning to everybody, and we were just really scared, and it was just a lot of kind of horror attached to that. and it was just in your head all the time. So this is just like the strip I did. Into the Outer, which was in a newspaper magazine called NYQ, and I think they turned it into Out Magazine, and they stole my pages, so I'm not very happy about that. But this is one of those things. I remember that when I did this, the people at work, when I worked at Hector Martin, they asked me, okay, because they assumed I was HIV positive because I did the comics for this Tales of the Closet, one of these promotional images. Actually, this is on the cover, I think. Cover number 2. Okay. Notice the people of color, when I'm working at Hector Martin, if anybody knows Hector Martin Institute, they were called the Institute for Protection of Lesbian and Gay Youth back in the early, mid-80s. And I was one of their first group of kids. I call myself, I was already like 19, but I was in college too. But I had seen the ad in the Village Voice back when it was a thing. And I went there, it was like a discussion group on a Wednesday, and I saw a counselor there. And they were on 23rd Street back then. And then they liked me so much, and I talked about doing a comic strip in college, and how you know, I didn't hear any like issues for gay folks. Like if you were a gay person, if you were gay teenagers, where do you find out how to be gay? You know, where's the rule book? There was no rule book, right? There was nothing there. So I told them, well, let's do a comic. And you know, the cause, it took me a couple of years to develop it, but I did most of it on my stomach, like in 1 month in front of the TV. And you know, like happy times at my mom's house. And she didn't appreciate that either. But they came out, and they gave me a bunch of statistics. They gave me who were they seeing, the fact that 1 in 4 teen suicides was directly related to orientation, how a lot of people were thrown to the streets, transgender kids, which we didn't have the word back then. We just called transsexual back then. We never called them transgender. They were just basically tossed away. And it was not only happening like that, but they were getting letters from other countries, letters from people in China, which was like really heartbreaking. So I read all that stuff, and I talked to them, and since I was one of the, I talked to a lot of kids in my discussion group, and the Tales Closet came out, which is a total fantasy when you think about it. They really only gay kids wish they could find all the other gay kids and they could hang out together. And they wish the gay kids were handsome and beautiful and powerful, and it kind of worked. This is the first page of Tales of the Closet. By the way, I sold this to the Lucas Museum, my first 25 pages. I think I could have gotten more, but I need an agent. But this panel right here is like this kid Tony. He's like the main character. He's one of the main characters. But his father kind of dies early on, and his father had this he had this fear for his father dying in the street because he was drinking all the time and stuff like that. And that's the same fear I had. And I didn't realize that I was basically putting my story in this character. And I was worried about my father because that's exactly my father on the sofa and stuff like that, drunk with all the beer cans around and stuff. And I always thought he was like, one day we're going to get a call, he's going to be dead in the street, while falling down the stairs on the elevator. So I had hit this character fall down the stairs, down the escalator down to the subway that wasn't working, and his West Farms is really high, so he just went to the bottom and broke his neck. And I didn't realize that because most of this stuff is intuitive. I didn't realize I was doing that story, but when I started thinking about it last year and people were interviewing me about it, I started crying in the interviews. I just couldn't stop. It's like, oh shit. So be careful of your comics. They'll come back for more. Okay. So this is kind of like most of the basic stuff. I hate my work here because the drawing's so bad. I remember, you see that little panel right there in the corner? I think 1, 2, 3, 4, right in the last section, the big one with all the kids. There's a tiny little balloon that says "School Sucks," and this was some high schools we used to kind of ban a comic. Oh, we can't do that. It says "School Sucks" there. Really excuse. But it went to most of the high schools in New York. It went to the high schools in Philadelphia. It went to a lot of places around. It went to other countries. So by the time we finished the first issue, all in all, about 100,000 copies went out after the whole time. So that was pretty good. We even had a list of giant comics ones. Again, Tales of the Closet. I was kind of worried. I was kind of worried about being truthful to people's ethnicities and stuff like that. But then I realized that, you know what, I'm Puerto Rican. I'm basically everybody. So, that's the excuse I use to write everybody. And plus I kind of use this format where It was, I was watching a lot of Spanish soap operas with my grandmother, and I kind of used that kind of like cliffhanger thing, and I kind of structured stories. Plus, Astro Boy and those cartoons I love so much, I kind of put everything. Archie Comics was a really big thing to me back then. And I discovered Love and Rockets, Hernandez Brothers, and that's so much, that really influenced a lot of my work. And I got to meet them too in San Diego. That's more of my early stuff. All my early stuff. So I guess this one was the one that really hit big, and I'm kind of happy about it. It was, I remember the production was delayed a little bit, and when it finally got in, it just kind of was a hit, and people were writing about it. And I remember that it got people doing reviews on it, on the Village Voice and stuff like that, which is kind of unusual for basically a social service comic book, you know. But I didn't approach it like that, I just wanted to tell the story. It was supposed to be a fun gay Archie, you know, like a little group of gay kids. But then I realized with all the numbers and the statistics and stuff, and the fears, like the whole thing, like isolation and how religion affects people and all this kind of stuff. We decided to name each comic book after a theme, and it would kind of play out. So the first one was isolation, and how they felt like they were like the only person, and how they didn't deserve to live, that kind of thing. And when they found each other, the strength they feel just by the little act of finding each other, it was pretty good. You got a lot of my early stuff in there. This is a scene where with a football player and the girl who's like the most popular girl in school, Mary, they're both gay, but they're in secret. And of course, they're stuck on a date with each other, and then they kind of find out about each other, and they kind of like it's a cute little scene. But look how horrible that truck is. Oh, man.
It looks cool, man.
It's supposed to be under the highway, with a lot of people parking in Queens. So this whole idea of like a lot of stuff happening on the bed. You know, when you're a teenager, you're on the bed a lot. You're like you're on the bed, just on the bed, and watching TV on the bed, or in front of the TV, that kind of stuff, or in the kitchen. These little personal moments. My characters think a lot. Remember Jennifer, my friend Jennifer, she's seen me since the beginning, Jennifer Camper, and she said that my comics is like, basically something bad happens to my characters, and then something else happens bad.
Something worse
happens. Yeah, that's basically the story of my life too. So. It's like this fatality. I mean, I should have been Korean, because this whole thing comes from Han. You know, the whole thing that life sucks. Life sucks. It really is in that, and particularly with the gay characters. Look at that, all my old early stuff, and this them in a little happy moment. They're playing music. So I didn't have friends when I was in school. I was one of those isolated kids. I was like really scared. My sexuality came out really early, so it basically freaked out my family when my mom found out about it. So I kind of kept it to myself. So I was one of those kids who was isolated and comics was one way to kind of like just escape in the world. So I used comics to kind of like save my life, but then I realized that could save other people's lives too, that kind of stuff. And most of the stuff is not with an intention, like a rigid, constructive intention to do things like that. It was kind of like, it just kind of flowed, which is kind of good. And that's kind of lucky. I was in the right place at the right time. That's why this comic book could come out. A lot of times they could ignore me when I worked in Marvel DC Comics. They didn't pay attention to me, so I could write gay and lesbian stories and transgender stories and people of color stories and talk about colorism and all that kind of stuff. I can do all that stuff, and they wouldn't pay attention, and that's how we get away with it. And then when we pay attention, they would kind of climb down on it. But that's the way to do it. So when you do comic books, make sure that nobody pays attention to you. Oh, this one of the stuff I did for anybody remember Details magazine?
Oh yes.
Yeah, so they did one about an election back then, and they asked me to do it. And the people who did Love and Rockets was doing it in the comic, and it was like all these famous cartoonists, and they asked me to do it too. And they paid like, it was like $1,600 back in the late 80s. I mean, that was a lot of money back then. That was like 4 months' rent. So I was very happy to do it. But you can tell, I didn't know what I was doing. They wanted the colors on overlays. So what I did animation style. And when I did it, I used acrylic paints on the back. So a lot of it was leaking out of the lines and stuff like that. So it wasn't perfect, but hey, it looks like art, right? Oh, this is also Oro, which is a comic. I get to go to Asia every year. But I started this party called also Oro, which is like a bear movement. It's like a bear art movement. So basically, I was kind of annoyed that the gay movement was so white, and it's like people of color kind of tangential to it, and it's just like, they were like the spice, whatever, or they kind of like guest stars every once in a while. And I didn't like that. It was just, so I wanted to do an event where the person of color was up in front as the object of beauty. We can objectify this person as much as we want, but it's a person of color. So we have like models for people of color, and they will pose, and people would drink and draw. It was a drink and draw back then, but back then it wasn't really called that back then. So I did it at the center twice, and it was successful twice. And the third time, you know, it was kind of like, and then I couldn't do it again because they started doing construction, and then they kind of started not taking my calls and stuff like that. So it was hard to do. And I would do versions of this at the Bronx Museum, like a full queer version with everybody. But the one for the Bears, I got to do it in Tokyo. When I went to visit, I had an ex that I went to visit and cause of this drama, and I went back, and I asked this bar on the first day they opened, and they said, okay, let's try it. And even though they didn't pay me, and this is something that's not paid because I get to take it off my taxes. So a person who's really poor can go to Asia and travel and then come back and take it all off their taxes. So it's like really wonderful. So I started doing it, and I've done it there for like 11 times. You know, and I've gone to Tokyo, Beijing, we did it in Singapore, so we get to go all these countries and do this event. And it's just me, really. And it's like get all the art supply and stuff together. But I just came back from it. That's why I couldn't do the thing myself. But it was a lot of fun, and I'm getting really old, and I'm getting to realize that this is kind of fun to do when you're an old person. Just look at all these sexy bears, and stuff like that. And
Still-
some really
still
good
sexy.
Artists, some really famous Japanese artists and cartoonists and manga artists, they show up and then they draw these beautiful things. So I'm really kind of happy. Jiraiya did. Anyone knows Jiraiya? He did like my logo. I'm like so happy with that.
Sweet.
Yeah, so I did a comic book, and he's also part of my I have this universe that I got a creative capital grant in 2015, and it's to do a series of comics based on the history of people of color in America using superhero tropes, right? So I started with the Tainos, and it's making crazy. I've got 27 pages left. I got 100 more to do. I'm like, ugh. And I got to finish it, but I have a whole bunch of different eras in America, and this is kind of like the 80s era, which kind of reflects like my time and stuff like that. So I'm using this like wrestler type superhero, Latino, and people need licenses to be superheroes and stuff like that. And he's the gay one, and he goes to a gay superhero bar, which of course is going to be one. Like that. So these are all gay superheroes. He didn't want to put the last page was kind of X-rated.
What did it show? What did it show? Tell
It
us.
just showed they were having sex with each other. He was having a threesome. This guy. And he fell in love with this guy who's kind of based on Astroworld. That's how he grew up to be a big
Astro Man.
kind of. He saw Mikey Iron, the way I call him, and he's an android, that kind of stuff. But I get to play with this mythology that I know, like all this superhero stuff I know from my life, all this, the Wizard of Oz stuff, the Wonderland stuff, and I can take all that public domain stuff and just shove it into a big bag, and then make it about people of color. And it's like, it just works so well in the head, and I just gotta get it out there. So this is kind of like the sexy part, but this story is going to be part of a longer story that happens about what happens when they find that, when the villains find out how to get rid of gay people to their genes, that kind of stuff. And the story that happens after that. Who's gonna defend them, right? Who's gonna help fight against it? That's my people of color, by the way. This is the root. This is the Taino stories that I'm beginning with. Starts with Kiyo. That's Kiyo in front. She's pregnant. She develops power out of desperation, kind of a way. That's the way it happens, in a way. I see them before Columbus comes, and then she's born around the time Columbus starts going there, and then the second trip when they come back and they start killing everybody, she's a witness to everything like that, and they go to the other island. So it's a long story that's involved with there, but because I realized that everything that's fucked up with America started in the Caribbean. It started with the Tainos. Everything that's fucked up about the world started with the Tainos and stuff, and what happened to them. And when I found out what happened to them, and I went to Puerto Rico and I did, I talked to university professors and I did all this research over there and I visited sites. And a lot of the kids there don't even have it in school. They always told them, no, the Tainos died away. 60% of that DNA can be found in Puerto Rican women, right? So it's something that they kind of just got erased, and I'm trying to help with that. But since there's not that much left, because everything that wasn't like in rock was burned and thrown away and destroyed. I have to kind of put it together myself. I'm hoping that I'm Puerto Rican enough that I can build it up the air with the spirits of the gods. You know? So I'm hoping, but plus there's a lot of my own stuff in there. You know, like the fact that Cimarrons. Did you know about the Cimarrons? I mean, the fact that the African slaves would run away and they go into the mountains with the Indians, the Tainos, and the indigenous people. They formed together these societies. They used to do raids on the ports and stuff like that. They used to fight for like 400 years. And it's like, where's the stories about it? Where's that movie? Where's the comics? So hopefully that's some of the stuff I did. They're having fun, but wait till what happens tomorrow. Anyway, that's my grandmother in the head. That's more of the, the cacique system. They're having a big festival, so everyone was kind of really happy, investing in the best feathers and stuff. And this is part of the Tale of the Closet. The Tale of the Closet started 40 years ago, and I still didn't finish number 10. How many years did it take me to finish number 10? It's taken me a long time. I guess life kind of beat the shit out of me, and I was trying to figure out how to do comics again, and how to get, I've been a teaching artist for a long time. I've been doing my own work and trying to survive. And being a teaching artist actually worked for me. And the Creative Capital Grant and them kind of explained to me that I have this special history that's kind of unique, and using that as a source of pride. And that kind of helps me move forward. But this a page from Tale of the Closet. I don't know if you like the cliffhanger. If you ever read Tale of the Closet, you can actually, if you read this, you can contact me on the website or stuff like that, and I'll send you the digital files, some really badly digitized files of the rest of the comics. But this is number 10, and hopefully I get to finish it. Look at the Ben 10, they got hurt, that kind of stuff. So that's me. I think that's what
Go on up. I don't want to take you.
Jorge.
So I'm actually not a comic artist. I'm trained formally as a fine artist. And so normally I do things like this. This is a still for a video called Angry. And so I'm trained in this sort of like annoying postmodern new conceptualist way of making art, right? So the idea is that art should be about the idea, not necessarily about emotion. And I sort of flip that because then it leads you into this place of like insincere irony, right? It's like all these mind games that you play with your art. So I decided to dedicate my life to make a career based on sincerity. And really the conundrum of, it's very easy to have an emotional conversation about conceptual things, but very hard to have a sort of, how can I say this, like a sort of critical conversation about emotions, right? Because emotions are relegated to sort of the idea of like the feminine, so it's irrational. You can't have a rational conversation about feelings. I sort of disagree, and have dedicated my life to kind of playing with that line. So in this video, I invite people to tell someone in their life that they personally know that they're angry at them. And they pretend that the camera is the person. So when you watch the video, essentially what happens is you are the recipient of the anger. And it's based on another video project I did called Sorry, where I offered people the opportunity to apologize to one person in their life that they had hurt. And that idea sort of is around, we're all sort of walking wounded, right? Either waiting to make an apology or waiting to hear an apology. And when you watch that video, which is an hour long, eventually your apology comes up, whether the one you want to make or the one you want to hear. And anger, apparently, is sort of just another version of hurt, right? And so the way this video is working out is not the way I anticipated, which is sort of a lot of like, express anger. It's really just people sitting there like hurt and telling someone like, you did this thing that hurt me and it made me angry. It's this project I've been working on for a really long time. So I decided as an artist to not depend on art to make art. What that means is I don't depend on sort of like things like the art market or the art world. Like I have a job and that pays for the things that I want to do, which means that I can do whatever I want and take my time and do it as long as I want, right? So this video, I started in like 2013 and one day it'll be finished. And so this is another project that kind of brings a lot of worlds together. So this is a project I started in 2006. The thing that I love about conceptual art is that you can always do it over and over and over again. It's sort of like a science experiment, which is how I initially started my academic career. I wanted to be a doctor, like an animal doctor, and then decided to be an artist, like my second year in college. And the art that made the most sense to me was conceptual because it felt like a science experiment. You set up parameters, you do this action, and then the thing happens. In this project, which is called Therefore for the Grace of God Go I, based on an old disco song about growing up in the Bronx and having to leave the Bronx because it's not a good place to raise children. I turn a room in a gallery or museum into a live HIV testing site, and I invite a local organization to come in and do testing, ideally in English and in Spanish, and so you get your results on the spot. I walk around the gallery basically signing people up, and there's a sign outside the door where it takes place that lets you know what time it's taking place and what dates it's taking place. So this project is interesting because over the years, I really, really love stigma. I think stigma is a great way to kind of figure out where society is, right? If you think about stigma, it's basically the things that you're not supposed to do or the things that are pointed out as being wrong in society. And those things shift over time. When I first did this project at Longwood Art Gallery in 2006, I was kicked out. A security guard said that what I was doing was inappropriate and stopped it. And then there was like a secret meeting held by these administrators, and then they said that I could do it 3 floors up because the room that I'd chosen in the gallery was used as a kitchen. But really it was just used to serve like wine and cheese and things like that. And they said there was a possibility of transmission. It's completely based on stigma. We're doing oral swabs. HIV cannot be transmitted by saliva, and it also dies when it touches air. So this is what I mean about stigma, right? And in terms of career, I dedicated my life to public health. This area is very sentimental. I used to work a few blocks away at a syringe exchange for unhoused youth. So I used to teach 15-year-olds how to inject heroin. As a job, right, to help prevent HIV transmission, overdose, abscesses, and hepatitis C. And when I used to do this job, people used to always say, like, what? Like, why do you do that? And I used to always say, well, somebody has to. And in terms of art making, when I do make objects, I do like the relationship between image and text. This is a pressure print. Basically, it's an underwear that's run through a press. And in the center, it says, sorry, right? Which is sort of like a joke, but not a joke, right? It's sort of like when you think about how we hurt each other, it's like the genitals often are a source of a lot of pain for people for all kinds of reasons. In terms of gender, it's been something that I've been exploring since I was very young. I grew up with a lot of privilege in many ways. I'm a child of poverty, one of 6 kids. But I think in many ways, the privilege is around that. Is my parents were so poor that they were too poor to have gender roles. So like, you know, when my dad didn't work, he would cook and clean. When my mom, when he was doing that, my mom was working. When she wasn't working, then she would take care of like the house and stuff, right? I also was given this really special privilege as a young kid. I'm the 5th out of 6. In Latino families, I'm indigenous Mexican, so you tend to separate socially. Like men hang out in one room, women hang out in another room. I was given this weird privilege of walking between the rooms or existing in both rooms. And no one ever questioned it, no one ever said like, why are you here? I was always just sort of allowed in. So I had this really weird sort of desire to have a kid, but not to be a parent, but to actually carry a child for many, 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 many years. And it wasn't resolved until I got a cat. And then it sort of like took care of itself in that way. This was a project I did, it's an image film project I did where this sort of character is Saint Felina. So I took this image and I made candles, votive candles out of it. And the idea is if you had a friend that needed to go home, you would light a candle for Saint Felina, who would ask all the stray cats in the neighborhood to make sure your friend got home safely. So yeah, this is my cat Kika, rest in peace. She was my first child. But I've always been obsessed with sort of these novellas that I sort of got to be around when I was a kid. But I never got formally taught how to read Spanish. So I always sort of depended on the image to tell the story. And it was always sort of, novellas are really great because they also have a great way of pointing at society and sort of what's accepted, what's not accepted. So here, of course, the stigma of being the child of someone who sins. Hija de una pecadora, which is like daughter of a sinner, right? And I think in the story, she's a sex worker. And sort of it carries that sort of like social, sort of political commentary, right? Sometimes they're super intense. This is, although it looks really ridiculous, right? The title is The Son of Your Lover. The story is incredibly tragic. It's a teenager who gets raped by her mother's boyfriend. And when she tells the mother slaps her and kicks her out of the house, and she becomes homeless. And in order to survive, she makes friends with these clowns, and she becomes like a homeless clown that begs for money. But she's pregnant, right? And then the way the story ends is her mother, she runs into her mother as a pregnant clown, and her mother recognizes her, and then asks for forgiveness and tells her to come home, right? And sometimes they're really intense. And so in this one, it's called The Punishment of the Homosexual. And this story is about a woman who becomes obsessed with this gay man, abducts him, holds him hostage, and essentially rapes him for weeks until his boyfriend figures it out, finds them, and rescues him. The comic that I made, or I've been making for many years, is really based more on sort of this sort of kind of novella. This one is I'm leaving because I love you. And he's crying, right? And so, so in 1995, this is the 30-year anniversary, I started doing this character named Dolores Fuertes, which in Spanish is a pun, translates into strong pains. She's always crying over this unknown him. And in many ways, there's always these sort of like art historical references and so moments that I love. So she's always at a kitchen table, which is sort of based on Karen May Weem's photo series, the Kitchen Table series, as a sort of like place of intimacy, contemplation, etc. And so this is how Dolores initially started. It was a single leaf comic that used to be displayed in stacks, and they were always free for the taking. Heavily influenced, of course, by folks like Felix Gonzalez Torres, the idea of sort of commerce and art, and what does it mean to give things away. In art school, I was sort of, like questioned or criticized. My professors were older, and so they would say, like, it's cute because you're young, so you can give stuff away, but what's going to happen when you're in your 30s and you need money, right? And so I always kind of rebelled against that idea, and this is why I've always sustained my own art career. But in this one, the narrative is sort of sad but adult. I didn't want to have her be like this sort of tragic. I mean, she's tragic, but like a sort of adult tragedy. So she runs into this hymn, right? But in this one, what she says is she didn't feel any butterflies this time. She only felt her feet on the ground. And they're always pinned to a newsprint because the way I was raised is to think of art as a sort of metaphor, not like a simile. So you're not describing something, the art is the thing. So for me, this is really about kind of trauma. So the idea of newsprint is like trauma and like a newspaper. If you put it away and sort of save it, it'll last for years. If, however, you deal with it, or like newspaper, you expose it to the elements, it eventually will die. And so that's the idea with Dolores, is that, you know, eventually, if you deal with your issues, they sort of, ideally, not go away, but they're not as sort of in the forefront. So I have made a few books. This is the first one, Always the Last to Know, con Dolores Huertas. And so, you know, there's always sort of this element of humor, but sort of also tragedy, but also this element of overt sexuality. In this one, you know, there's always sort of this sexy moment. So the narrative is the feeling of my heart slamming deep into the pit of my stomach. But also a great opportunity to show an ass shot, right? And when you actually look at the book, it's actually erotic. She's imagining the affair, and the affair are actually black and white photographs of me and my first lover having sex. But I was asked to keep this talk PG, so there would be no explicit images in this talk.
PG-13.
PG-13, right? Adult topics without adult imagery. So this is the second book I made called Se Acabó, which means it finished, based on an old La Nupe song. And my dream came true. So I've only sold, say, like 3 things in my whole life, and it's to people I kind of know. So my biggest fantasy in exhibiting art is for someone to steal it, because then that way I can collect insurance. And so this was in an exhibition in the Bronx called Perfect Lovers, and it was displayed on the shelf, and someone actually stole it. But the gallery didn't have insurance on it. So I didn't make any money. But my dream came true, right? Someone stole it. And so this is the last time I had done a Dolores, which was like 10 years ago. So when Carlos asked me to be part of the comic sort of book that he was doing, I like really didn't want to do this because I've become very lazy in my gender, in the sense that like I really don't like doing this because it's painful to like shave. It's painful to like spend all this money on shit like makeup and wigs and things like that. So instead, what I decided to do was to focus on like the element of storytelling. So I did this sort of a story based on me going back to Mexico to sneak in a few bottles of poppers for a lover that I had there, because poppers are impossible to get. Where I'm from Mérida, Yucatan, which is sort of the peninsular part of Mexico, the part that was just renamed the Gulf of whatever. I'm from that part, which is highly indigenous, right? So I'm part Mayan, and is now actually sort of being gentrified. So when I went back, what I found is that the city had changed a lot. A lot of foreigners going in and buying properties, turning them into Airbnbs. People are being displaced. People are leaving the city. So when I think I maybe have announced it on Facebook that I was going to Mexico. Someone wrote like, "Oh, I have dear friends now that live in Mérida. You should go hang out with them." I do not go back home to Mexico to hang out with Americans, and that's not what I wanted to do. Right? And so there's graffiti on this wall that says in Spanish, "They're colonizing us." So it's very much in the air in Mérida right now. And so the thing also with sort of art making, right, is that it's inherently political to call yourself an artist. And even though I like to say that I'm dealing with like the politics of emotions, right, I also like to sort of touch on things that are very real. On the top, you see an image of the center of the city, which is where the cathedral is. The cathedral is actually made out of stones that they ripped off a pyramid. And I remember when I first went, my mom said like, "Oh, isn't this beautiful? Like, look at this cathedral." It's actually, I think, the biggest by volume cathedral in the Americas. And my response to her was like, "Yeah, imagine all the blood that's on these stones." Sometimes I like to kill my mom's vibe. Because she likes to elevate the European and the white, which I get. I used to sort of blame it on like macro politics, like the sort of idea of colonialism. But what it really boils down to is my mom is half white, and she misses her white mother, and none of us came out white. So I sort of give her grace in that way, right? She misses her mom. On the bottom is graffiti on one of the entrances to the city center. And so in colonial times, there was these sort of big gates where the white people lived within the gates, the brown indigenous people lived outside the gates. So there is this sort of issue of femicides in Mexico, right, where women are being killed. And so there's graffiti on one of these walls as you enter the city that says, I'll translate it in English, it says, femicides, we are the screams of those who are no longer here. So there's a lot of sort of political stuff injected into this story. And even pointing out to very specific things about Yucatan, which is where the 41 were sent. So for those of you that don't know the story about the 41, there is a Netflix show about it, where in the 30s in Mexico there was the sort of secret meetings of gay people, but really privileged gay people that had this sort of secret society. And so the police broke in and arrested all the people that were at this party. There were actually originally 42 people at the party, but it's called the 41 because the 42nd person was the president's son-in-law. And so he didn't get arrested. But those that did get arrested got exiled to Yucatan to sweep and dig trenches. So Mérida is really weird because it's actually pretty homophobic, but also really gay at the same time. So the first time I went, we were driving and there was a huge billboard of a shirtless guy and it said, gay club. And I started laughing and my mom was like, what's so funny? And I'm like, they don't even do that shit in New York, right? Like they may do a rainbow flag outside, but they don't do a big billboard that says gay club with the shirtless guy. So that's the last comic. So in this comic, some sort of funny things happen, I guess. Throughout the history of Dolores, there's always this him, but you never see him or never figure out who he is. Actually, in one of them, there was this running joke with a friend of mine that I had where it's just 4 squares in the comic and it just says he's not coming back. So I used to joke that, like, you know, she's really talking about her relationship with Jesus, right? But in this one, there's actually him, right? So there's an image of this person that I was trying or about to establish a relationship with. And this one's called, what's it called? What's this thing called? I forgot. It's a song. I forget her name. She's dating a football player. Taylor Swift. It's a Taylor Swift song that he talked about. That it's sort of about fate. And yeah, the song.
You belong with me?
No, it's a simple thing. It's, I don't know, I want to say Star Maker or something like that, but it's about fate, basically. And so he brought that into our story, right? And I'm not going to talk about the story's right there. But it's also this weird thing for me of like, you know, I'm this person in their 50s now, and I'm like, I don't, so there's this element of like sexiness, like how do I bring sexiness into it? And also reality, and there's nothing sexy about a sink full of dishes, right? But if you're doing it in a lace bottom, right, and you don't have a top, then it becomes sort of sexy. So it's still built into it. And so, yeah, it's a mess, but yeah, so enjoy the story. It's kind of funny because it talks about things like Ramadan. The person that is featured in the story was Algerian, and part of the way our relationship evolved is very hot and exciting in the beginning, and then Ramadan hit, and he was like, oh, I don't do things during Ramadan. And I thought that was really beautiful, that someone would love something more than sex. And then so I kept trying to negotiate it and saying things like, well, what about after dark? Like, I thought we could do things after dark. And then it turned out that you decided not. Then I started watching these videos that were really funny of like Muslim women basically saying like, don't believe people that say they can't see you during Ramadan because they're just playing you. And so that's essentially kind of what happens where, you know, like once Ramadan ends, I'm really excited that we're going to see each other, and instead what happens is he says like, oh, if we keep doing this, someone's going to get hurt. But the reality is, right, someone already got hurt. But yeah, that's my talk.
So before we go on, I just want to point out that those of you who have programs, you see that we were also meant to spend time with Sharon Dela Cruz, but sadly she is not feeling well, so unfortunately she couldn't be here. But if we could all send her a nice hello, say hi Sharon. Hi Sharon. Get well soon. Say get well soon.
Get well soon, Sharon.
So pretty soon, you know, she will feel better and come check out the show, and we'll get to spend more time with her. Now we're gonna go on with the show. Medar's just using the restroom for a second. So yeah, maybe we can use this time to stretch a little bit. You can get up if you want. We're gonna start in just a couple of minutes, okay? There's two more artists, and then we can buy some comics and talk to each other. Okay? All right. Okay, everybody, please take your seats. Take your seats, everybody. We're going to continue with the program. And we've got, everybody, please take a seat. Take a seat, please. Okay, let's go ahead.
All right.
Come, you can walk through.
My name is Mena de la Cruz. When Carlo invited me for this talk, I was thinking, well, it's been a while since I've had a zine. I don't have a zine on this table, but this was around the last time that I made one. And what you see is an image of me trying to sell them for $1 at Union Square back in 2017. I would do this thing where it would be like, either you give me $1 or you give it to me, or I give it to you for free if you follow me on Instagram right now. So I got a lot of followers, but not a lot of dollars. I was also basically painting it on the spot, like just kind of cleaning up the lines on this comic that I had already drawn. And I had this series, which you can see the zine, the larger format of that zine on my wall here. And this was the small one page, you know, you get a page and you put it a certain way, and you cut it a certain way, you get a mini zine. And this was just me kind of experimenting with zines for what felt like the first time on my own. I had at this point contributed to collaborative projects that were in the zine format. But I had created a character. I had created a couple of characters, and I intended to run with it. And the subject was about race. But this is the only image I have, so I'll talk a little bit more about it. Let me see. Oh, there they are. I for some reason we were here, but let me just backtrack a bit. These are just some of the, I decided to include in my slideshow some of the stuff that inspired my comic. So I would take like an Ernie Bushmiller strip, and I would just like make it somehow about race. Specifically, it would always be Nancy and Sluggo, but
for me, it was just like the black character and the white character, and it was very simple visual tropes that were for me quite easy to translate into some conversation about the dynamic between a black and a white character, which at the time for me was still something that was quite fresh for me. I'm Dominican, and there wasn't a lot of conversations about that at the household. My father kind of prepared me for that conversation. He's a writer, but my mother did the opposite. So there was just always debate going on between my parents and I, and between it's like the devil and the angel on my shoulder. So these are just some of the comics that I was like inspired by, that always had a similar dynamic going on. Obviously the Boondocks. These are all things that I saw in the newspapers. And then Ben Passmore, I think I read Your Black Friend around the same time that I was drawing these comics. Brina Nunez, also using comics to contemplate identity. So then I started making these, and so these were all just one-page strips. It was always like sort of like a punchline sort of thing going on, a visual punchline, which I had a lot of fun with because I had just graduated from school for illustration, and I really just wanted to make something beautiful at the same time while trying to say something. Eventually, after a couple of years of this, I feel like I ran out of the same punchline. I feel like this was a reaction to Donald Trump's first election, and this sort of like I told you so thing was going on in my head of like I was too like I told you so to my mom maybe, and to a lot of my friends. I never had a professor of color in art school, so it was just all of this internal dialogue that I was finally finding a way to express. But I feel like eventually I just got over it. I ran out of jokes. So I just kind of put that down for a while. And then I started, so this is me, but then I started reading other comics. Jesse Lambert I'm more recently familiar with. He's based in Queens. These are cartoonists that I started reading. Obviously Art Spiegelman, I read while I was in art school. These are cartoonists that I've always read, but who I look to now in regards to making connections with my more recent work. Adele Rodriguez made a book about immigrating from Cuba in the 80s in El Mariel. This one I also most recently read, also just was published last year. This one meant a lot to me because I grew up in Miami, Florida, and I always wanted to be Cuban. There's a story of me in daycare in Hialeah where I used to cry when I was told I wasn't Cuban. My godmother was Cuban. I just wanted to be Cuban. So this story of this Cuban child who immigrated during El Mariel in the 80s is actually very complex to me, as even though I'm not Cuban, because he's walking this fine line that I oversimplified in my 20s of being anti-communist, but also anti-capitalist. Like he's like right in the center. He's walking this like tightrope in this story. The name of the story is called Worm. I highly recommend that book. But Chester Brown, actually, this book, Paying for It, I have it in my backpack right now. I just finished it. This book is about Chester Brown's experience paying for it, being a John, and his and just the difficult conversation of why he feels we should normalize sex work. And anyway, Joe Sacco, another very important person I look up to quite a bit. And what's interesting about Joe Sacco is he's trained as a journalist, and just so happens to have amazing drawing skills. And so, and Alan E. Kober is somebody I more recently discovered too, who would go visit nursing homes and prisons and jails and draw people. So that leads to some of my work. So this is a drawing of mine that I did when I first started working at Rikers Island for the Brooklyn Public Library. These two drawings I did from memory. So with no penciling, just sort of just putting the brush at the time, the brush down, and then just kind of like drawing one thing first, and so the bars don't connect. There's no anatomical correctness or anything involved here, but these are drawings that I made because there are no there's no cell phones allowed. There's no photography allowed on Rikers Island, so I felt this need to still document my experience of providing library service there. And the most important thing that I wanted to capture was like the grime, the overall. This specific building is called the Anna M. Cross Center. It's no longer open, but it was a really old building when I showed up there, and it's just it's like the place has a certain smell that I wanted to somehow capture in my drawings. And see that these are also drawings that I captured while I was working there, and this is specifically at the infirmary, which is still open, the North Infirmary Command it's called, and it's also historically a pretty crazy place. It's been open for a while. This specific floor is representative of what it's floors 2 and 3, which are where the people who are there are essentially in solitary, but they call it protective custody because solitary is not legal in New York City, so they'll just change the name. And these are actually kind of comical because like we would roll in there with our book cart, and I would write down immediately anything I hear or draw it really quickly, and the guy on the left says, "The little short guy is back." And he's really excited because we're gonna bring him comics. This guy in particular is having a whole conversation about the different types of comics he's into. He also starts asking us, do you have any art history books, it says here. And so I tried looking for it in our small stack, and he goes, "What about one on Cézanne?" And so I thought it was just like something worth sharing with the world. At this point I didn't know with whom yet. That the people in these spaces, want to read about Cézanne, want to read comics. Here's one the guy said on the bottom. You should check out this comic called The Darkness. It's so good. Ironically, he's in the darkest place of Rikers Island, arguably, and all by himself. So here's just what it looks like. And, like they have to kind of crouch down in order to even take a real look at the books, and through these slots where food is being passed. And then this eventually led to an article I wrote for the New Yorker. So what I'm showing in this slideshow is just like my process a little bit. The one on the left is this one from memory that I did in one sitting. The one on the right is essentially the same image done in several sittings with more anatomical correctness and things that just makes more sense visually. Again, here, basically for the article, I was creating an arc, a story arc that represents, at this point it was about 6 months to a year of my experiences working on Rikers, but the way that the story is told is as if it's just in a day, so I'm trying to fit in all that information in this sort of one-day story arc. So in the beginning of the day, I'm getting ready for work, listening to NPR. 2022 in particular, the numbers of people dying on Rikers were at an all-time high for a while there. And so on the left, you see just the information in its raw form, and this very much was a collaborative experience with an art director. And then on the right, the same sort of visual thing led to. This is what the book cart looked like in a closet where we, store our books, with this file cabinet where we store some more books. This is again in the infirmary where I felt it was important to show that there are people in wheelchairs, people who, in my opinion, hold very little threat to society and are yet still locked away here. And here's a map where you can see the Vernon C. Bain Center, which is part on the Hunts Point section of the Bronx. It's still there, but it's not open anymore as of maybe a couple of years ago. But I got to visit it, and it's at the time was the largest prison barge in the world, which a lot of people, unless they know people who are there or work there, don't know about. It's in person, it looks like a skyscraper floating in the water on its side. And while you're inside, you feel the bobbing of the waves, and it's just like this. It's a really, to me, just a crazy place, and I felt I needed to include, although in the sketch I hadn't thought about that just yet. Here's another image. On the left, you see just like this sort of more raw ink drawing. On the right, something that took more sittings. And every time I would be working on this while going back and forth to the job, so I would like look around. It was an interesting practice of like knowing using my memory and knowing what I have in the drawing, and then being in the space, and then taking a note of like, oh, actually the trash can is over here, or there's this sort of wire running through the wall, or there's a clock. But really also realizing that there's not that much in these spaces. It's almost, prisons exist for what they don't have rather than for what they do have. So this is again another image of the infirmary and the protective custody. Here's an image of a trans woman being walked through an Amel facility with emergency service unit, aka turtles or ninja turtles. This was just one of the only times I saw the emergency service unit people doing their job, and there was like 6 of them escorting somebody in this full gear, and the person's like half their size, and they're videotaping it. It was just like this weird scenario. I had no idea what was going on, so I just shared it as the way I experienced it. And here's this Russian individual whom was very difficult to find books for, because we would just grab any Russian book we could find, which were very little, and then he would tell us that it's crap, because it had nothing to do with what he was interested in. It's probably just something completely, a romance novel or something you really didn't want to read, I don't know. But it was interesting. When there were no Russian books, I'd always try to get him to read comics, because it's like, well, at least there's some visual element here. You could still follow along. Here's an artist who would make amazing sculptures out of soap, and was producing them at a massive scale. Everybody had like a gift from him. He had his bed with boxes just filled with them, and he would dry them on the radiator, and it was just like, it was amazing. He was one of many artists that I met while working there. Here's an actually kind correctional officer who would ask us for cookbooks jokingly, but we couldn't tell how serious she was being, because she would put on "Where's my cookbook?" every single time she'd see us. But it was like, I don't know. I just included this image. Just to sort of flip the narrative a little bit about who are these correctional officers. A great majority of the ones in the infirmary were women. I would say more than 80% of the correctional officers in Rikers are people of color. And I just think there's an interesting story there. And this is just the last image of the article, also the last image of the slide. Oh, no, one more. The last image of the article, on the left you see this sort of silly drawing. On the right it got a little bit more tight. And I talk about how, I'm always complaining about how tiring it is to be standing up all day, but somebody's always checking me and reminding me that at least I get to go home. These are just other illustrations I did. Kind of me borrowing this comics format with like the way that panels can sort of be, I don't know, displayed all at once and viewed all at the same time. And these are individuals who I got to meet through an organization called the Rikers Public Memory Project, who records audio of people who have been incarcerated at Rikers and makes it available to the public via the library or their website. I could go on about all this, but I'll stop here.
Today, to close the show, will be Daisy Ruiz.
Hey everyone, I'm Daisy. This is my debut comic into publishing by Black Jose Press, and it's an award-winning comic. It's about when I was 12 and I was getting bullied in middle school for having a little butt. So this takes place in the South Bronx, very specifically between 3rd Avenue, 149th Street, and Jackson, the stop where the public library is at, but I forgot the name of that one. So it goes, I'm built like this, small chest, belly, small bottom, and then these are like, here I put shorts, but there were really underwear that said Punk Princess that I got in Knickerbocker. Yeah, I'm Latina, but not the type you see on Univision or Telemundo. And what's really funny about this first page is that they put this on the news, they put this on Telemundo, but they blurred out Univision and Telemundo. And I was like, wow, they're kind of pussy.
Yes.
Okay. I didn't look like Thalia or Mestiza legend Selena, más bien me parezco a la India Maria. La India wasn't a character perceived as hot, I wasn't hot. It's kind of funny because now people do say that I look like Selena, not the butt part, but the face. And this panel is like describing how Laindia Maria, she's like a comedic relief character. She has like a lot of movies where she's not dumb, but because she's naive, because she comes from a small pueblo, small town, which is the same way my family we're from like a small, it's not even a town, we're from like a village where we literally live across a sugarcane field, and my grandpa was the first one in my family to like leave Veracruz to go to Mexico City, and then he brought all my family to Mexico City, and then my mom moved here to New York, and so now I'm in New York. And so I just grew up feeling like I was Latina, but not in the way of like, I'm not a white Latina, and I'm not a super presenting mixed indigenous person with desirable body features. So I'll never be on Don Francisco trying to be Miss Colita. So when I hit puberty, everyone began to cut ass on me. So my aunt says, "Oh, my poor niece, she don't got a butt, but she's middle-aged. She also has a butt." And then the guy saying, "Hijo puta, estás bien fea," which means, "Holy shit, you're mad ugly." But he's some self-hating mestizo man with no ass. And then on the bottom, middle school haters with a booty, they're saying Mexican bitches be built like SpongeBob. And then you have SpongeBob twerking with the Mexican flag. And the top panel, that's Don Francisco. He was like, well, he's like late night Hispanic television. He's Chilean, Jewish Chilean, I think. And he had this segment on his show every Saturday where he'd bring out the girls with like the fattest asses, and you would vote by clapping who has the fattest ass. So I'm saying, I'm never gonna be on that. I became hyper fixated on how I looked to the world. If only I had the wagon. I feel cursed pictures her being built like this, and then in the background it says slim, thick, small chick, but she back in that wagon, and she's like, I'm so ugly, and all of the panels are all based on like how my room looked, how everything in the house looked like. So I'm bringing you into my memory, and this is like the boombox I got for Christmas 2003. When I wasn't hating my body, my mind wandered off, daydreaming of magical girls, Yu-Gi-Oh cards, Barbies, and writing fan fiction at the library. So the library in specific that I'm referring to is the Woodstock Library in the South Bronx. That library was very formative to me joining the internet and writing fan fiction and just like meeting people online. Even though I was bullied at school, my online self got a lot of love. My inbox flooded with messages of how funny and great my fanfics were. It gave me joy. Through my online alter ego Angel's Kiss, I wrote fanfics of my favorite anime boys. The love interest was always a brown-skinned girl who wanted to be loved and could hold her own. And she's saying, oh my god, my first taste of internet fame, because I would write fanfiction of like, if you guys know the anime Inuyasha, there's a character named Sesshomaru, and I had a crush on him, so I would write fanfiction about that, and people would write me messages after I posted online saying, oh my god, like I really love your fanfics. So I've been online since I was 13. Outside of the internet, I dreaded going to school, my stomach in knots, guts bubbling, and hands sweating. I made myself as small as possible in order to not get any attention. I wore baggy clothes and my hair was a frizzy mess. Passing by boys was a gamble of getting ignored or insulted. And she's saying, please ignore me, please ignore me, please ignore me. And what I really like about this panel is like how what I like about my comics and my work in general is that I give everyone like their own personality. So like the guy in the back, he's wearing like a FUBU shirt, and then this guy, he's got his hair in like waves. And I just really want to show what it was to be in middle school in the South Bronx in 2004. Ayo, girl with the Arizona, my friend here thinks you're hot. Ew, that bitch is ugly as fuck. Nah, I'm good. I just want to walk to class, mind my own business, and make it through middle school. Those boys aren't even that cute. I shouldn't care what they say, but it hurts. And you can't really see it too much, but the guy that's like saying she's ugly as fuck, he has acne. So I'm like, at that time I was very shy about speaking up for myself, but like then I'll get like a comeback way later in the day. I'll be like, damn, I should have called him like a pizza face or something. But I just wanted to mind my own business. School made me sad, but having friends made it better. And then you can kind of see the difference in, even though everyone is poor in the Bronx, like I felt like because I was trying to make myself small as possible and to not get noticed, I wasn't wearing the same thing as everybody else. So this girl, she's got like an angel baby tee, and like this other girl's wearing like a Juicy Couture tracksuit, and like they all have like their gold and stuff. And then in the back, you got a guy with like what's it called, the Nuggets jersey, like logo and stuff. But then she sees her friends, and they're like, hey. Treasure and Marie were outcasts just like me. Treasure for being an openly bisexual goth, and Marie for emanating an odor the smell of ivory soap and sour sweat. And even though the kids made fun of us, we could count on each other. We could count on one another throughout the school year. And then I feel like this is like a very like Bronx thing, or like a very inner city school thing where they put like the MLK poster in the back. And like, I don't know, it's weird. It's weird being part of the public school system in New York because it kind of feels like jail. And then I have like my friend Treasure, she's wearing a, what's he called? The Undertaker from WWE. Yeah, and I like to include like very small details like that because it shows like what time I'm living in and how it is to be a kid at that time. Cassandra, late as usual, iced orange juice in hand, attitude on 100. She wasn't my friend, she just sat next to me in class. But she would defend me from bullies, all in exchange for drawings that put SpongeBob and access to class notes. He's like, thank you for finally joining us, Cassandra. And she's like, Mister, don't start, it's too early for all that. He's like, just go sit down, please. She was everything Treasure, Marie, and I weren't. Cassandra had double D's, the latest name brand clothes, kicks, and attention from boys. Yet, she was an outcast in a way like us. Girls jealous of her called her a hoe behind her back. She even got jumped in the girls' bathroom over a boy. And she's like, Gordita, give me some paper. Okay, give me 25 cents. Gordita, stop playing with me. And she's like, I'm kidding. But she's really thinking, with all the sheets I've given her, I should be charging. And then she's like opening her binder and the guys are like gossiping about Cassandra in the back. And like, there really was a girl like that in my school. Like she was really popular, but she wasn't popular with the girls. She was only popular with the guys. And through friendship with her, that's how people started like commissioning me to do like hood drawings for them, like hood Tweety. And it would always be like the people that were like gang members in my school, so it was like a lot of bloods. And I kind of became even though like I was like seen as like the loser, like I got popularity in school because of that, because like I wasn't hanging out with the bloods, but I was like making art for them. And I've always been like someone that's always like in the cut, so I'm always someone that I'm friends with everybody. I'm friends with like people who are like super popular, but I'm also friends with people who are like playing Yu-Gi-Oh. We have 15 minutes left. I'm taking a personal call. Behave. Oh no, I got scared. The last time there was free time, I got picked on by Tina. So I began to pray OD. Bro, she's mad ugly. 5 minutes hadn't even passed when the day took a turn for the worse. The boys made a list. Girls in class rated from hottest to ugliest. What are y'all laughing at? Let me see. And what I'm trying to show in this panel is that it's always like the boys that they're not like popular per se, but they wear nice clothes. And so it's like all these fashion boys turning into fashion men who like just like cut ass on young girls. And then that's why people wonder why are girls from the Bronx like so mean, because it's like a defense mechanism. Like you have to be a bitch. And she swipes the paper from him, and he's like, and the friend on the back, he's like, "Cálmate, coñazo," and he's like, "Yo, why are you like this?" So I wanted to include in this comic the real life conversations that middle school children have. Some people would think that like middle school children are like innocent and stuff like that, but like no, these kids curse. And I worked for a little bit with some middle school girls at the girls club, and like just hearing their conversations like reminded me of when I was in middle school. And just like talking to them is so funny because like I've already lived everything that they're going through. And like even when they're talking about like, oh, this girl, she's trying to take my friend's man, and I'm like, actually girls, it's actually the guy. He's the one putting everyone against each other, so he's the one you need to beat up, not the other girl. And she's like, OMG. And you can see like her nails. I'm like, why are 12-year-old girls like having like long acrylic nails? But I mean, she was serving a look, so I don't blame her for it. And her friend's like, let me see that. Oh my god, I got a 12. Hottest girl in class, what the hell? Who got the low score? And she's like, girl, who do you think? And they're like looking back. And yeah, these are mean girls, and I feel like in the Bronx, one way to like to stunt on people is just to have like really nice clothes and be like real matchy matchy, even though everyone's broke, but and she's like, go over there and show her, and so they're walking over to Gordita to show her, and you see like the Juicy Couture bag, and my friend in the back, she's swiping through like her CD case to see what CD she's gonna put in next. This can't be good. Look at what the boys rated you. I read down the list of girls. Cassandra's name had the most tallies. I didn't bother to count. My eyes searched for my name until I found it. A 1. My friends scored low as well. The rest of the girls ended up somewhere in the middle. That was the safe spot, the middle. Not too hot, not too ugly. And then you see the list and all the girls like put up against each other. But even though like, so Nicole, which is the girl in blue, the real instigator, she got a lot of points, but they wrote that she's really mean. And then her friend, she's like annoying. Cassandra, she's got a lot of points and she's hot. There's this other girl named Antonia. She has freckles. Dayanara, she has a big forehead. Treasure's fat. Maria's smelly. And then Gordita, she's just mad ugly. And then for this one, like, these are all girls that I feel like I've definitely like, they're definitely based on real people. So there's like, I have like this one girl that was half Irish, half Puerto Rican. There's like a lot of half Irish, half Puerto Ricans in the Bronx. And then like a Dominican girl, my friend, she's what's it called? She's from Ghana. My other friend, she's just like Black African American. And then these other girls. And so she's like, so what do you think? And everyone's just like paying attention in the back. They're like, oh, what's gonna happen? What's she gonna say? And she's like, well, I don't care about your busted bootleg beauty contest. I was tired of being picked on. Anger rose inside of me, pushing away all feelings of being scared. I had to fight back. And then this is where it ends. But yeah, these are based on my memories. I feel that it's a really great time for this book to come out during this time because there's like a lot of BBLs happening, a lot of girls of color, a lot of nurses who shouldn't be having BBLs. And it's funny because my friend Rachel, she introduced me to this girl named Stephanie Andrea who has like this BBL video. And she's half Mexican, half Colombian. And honestly, she didn't have like a little butt before, but she had like tiny hips. And she shows like her whole video of like her going to Miami, getting the BBL done, coming back, losing her BBL pillow on the plane. And just like, it's interesting to see girls that are younger than me who like we're the same race, like getting these surgeries, and now people are getting the BBLs taken out too. Now that we have like a change in beauty standards again, and I feel like people are starting to get skinny again. And so my comic is just saying, hey, like even if you're curvy or you don't have curves, like you're still going to be picked apart by patriarchy, and you should just love yourself as you are. I hope people don't think that I'm like against surgery. Like I actually I'm for the baddies, but just please be careful and like do it for yourself. Don't do it for like the validation of men, because they'll do anything at this point. But yeah, that's my comic. And it's like also my love letter to the South Bronx. The South Bronx has been having a lot of issues, specifically 3rd Avenue. There's always like memes and shit about like how there's so many like drug addicts in that area, and like now it's getting gentrified. But to me, like that's my hometown. I love the Bronx. Even though like it was a hard time to grow up there, it gave me the tools that, like, I can't even get bullied anymore. Like, I'm like, okay, you try to bully me, I'm from the Bronx, bitch. Like, what are you gonna do? Like, nothing to say. It's nothing I haven't heard before. And so, like, that informs, like, a lot of my comedy, the way that I write. And so, yeah, that was Gordita. I have it for sale here. And, yeah, thank you so much.
Can you tell us about the show at the Lower East Side Girls?
Oh yeah, there's my show is this Tuesday, April 8th from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Girls Club. I have a painting on there and it's about growing up as a girl in New York. So I have a little painting of this girl and it has like decoration on it, like blingy style. It's like these gifs that you would put that sparkle on top of pictures, and we will put it up for MySpace. And I have like a couple and they're Mexican, and a girl has like the Mexican flag coming out of her back pocket, and they're wearing like Echo red shirts and Pepe jeans. So it's like a lot of my work is just very reminiscent of the early 2000s, documenting the clothes of that time, and also documenting the areas that are special to me. So if you guys are free, I'll be there.
Can we get all the artists together, please? I just want to thank everybody for coming to our show. This is like the picture time. Can you please help us document this moment? It's here. Can you take a picture? So, thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Stay and get some comics if you want. There's some comics for sale. Okay.
Just a second, I want to read, please. If it weren't for this man, I wouldn't know about Love and Rock. I would have found out 10 years later. Nice.